Welcome to episode 25 of Accessible Finance, where we demystify personal financial topics and answer your questions so you leave saying, I get it now.
I'm Rachel Johns.
And I'm Eric Johns.
You forgot.
Yeah, I did. Let's dive in. Let's go. We're going. Rolling.
So this client scenario number?
Yes, ma'am. You reading it this time?
Sure.
Let's do it.
Okay. Correct me or jump in if I miss something.
Sure.
Okay. So we have a high net worth widow. Let's call her Betty.
Great. Betty
right.
works.
So Betty has two kids. Okay. Kid number one, she tells us that he plays B-side prop for LSU rugby.
Wow, sounds like a guy.
What are your feelings about that one?
The guy's guy.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
we're going to find out.
His major
Yes.
was what, Eric?
Debauchery.
AKA?
Kinesiology.
All right. Now
put something on the pen. They ask you, you know?
I was going to say, that's how you get to play the rugby.
Yeah.
The second kiddo, is an MIT grad who is currently working at NASA.
Yeah.
Kid number two, the MIT graduate, has 3 children. Kid number one, a rugby friend, claims to have no children.
He says,
yes.
And we quote, never underestimate the power of denial.
So there's a whole thing to unpack there.
Yeah.
So our friend Betty had kids late in life. She's currently 70 years old. She has a net worth of $30 million. $5 million of it is tied up in a C Corp, $20 million's in an LLC. And then the other 5 is tied up in like bank, house, things like that. $2 million of it is in a taxable brokerage account.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. She's come to us and expressed that her biggest concern right now is how to avoid taxes.
Right.
At all phases, but particularly concerned about like estate taxes and things like that.
Not a fan of handing money to the government. Very few people are.
Oh, true. We can help with that. She has been hospitalized a few times for various illnesses. So where do we start with all of our clients, Eric?
Cash flow. Let's dive in. So it's actually not uncommon. You might be thinking to yourself, this is ridiculous. Like this woman has more money than she'll ever possibly need.
30 million.
Yeah. Why is this a big deal? Right. So we actually want to talk about it. So did we talk about her after-tax income?
What did we say? Did not yet. 600.
Okay. Let's say it's 600K a year. All right. That's what she's making after tax.
Correct.
All right. We're just going to take that, divide it by 12, and arrive at $50,000 a month. Okay. There's a couple things to note, though. Upon examining cash flow, this is not uncommon, again, to see credit card interest. Why would you have credit card interest if you have $30 million to your name?
So she does have credit card interest.
She does. $2,000 a month of credit card interest on $100,000 of credit card debt. It's not that she does not pay it. It's just that she does not pay it on time.
It's also not that she doesn't have the money to pay it either.
Absolutely has the money to pay it. Doesn't do it.
Mm-hmm. Does she have an automatic payment set up?
No, doesn't want it. Doesn't trust it.
That generation.
Right.
It's true. And
it's okay.
You don't have to trust
the automated.
Correct.
But this is the price you're going to pay for it.
Correct.
So actually, and another thing that we might talk to about clients like this, and we'll talk about this because we're going to talk about estate planning, is that if she derives positive values or happiness from her spending now, it actually behooves her, it benefits her to lower the value of her estate. Mm-hmm. Because as we'll find out in our discussions with her, she's probably not going to really want to give up too many assets right now. And in order to do most of this estate planning, you have to tuck them away into an irrevocable trust. Irrevocable trust, you like to say. I've heard it said both ways, but
I do not like irrevocable.
Oh, you like irrevocable?
I do
and I see, and most people I speak with say irrevocable.
That is just wrong. But you come to the dark side.
Rachel says objectively incorrect. Yeah, my default is now irrevocable. So anyway, we're going there. Sorry, that just means you tuck it away and you don't get access to it anymore.
Yeah.
Let's say that's a short.
It is an estate planning tool. It is something that we would discuss and consider.
Right, but so we wouldn't be upset if she spent more than $50,000 a month. We would just have to discuss, which bucket she's going to draw that from and everything else.
Correct.
Also, I want to clarify, when we say LLC, we're actually talking about a partnership. Mm-hmm. It's a partnership that she has very little to no control over. She's just getting passive income from it.
Right, because again, as a high net worth heir, a lot of the things that she's deriving income from were things that were in existence long before she arrived.
Right, and so one of the things that's kind of important to talk about here is, even though some of this estate, this is pretty high. This is going to be some pretty high level estate planning.
Yeah.
And when we talk to her initially, we find out that she has a will. It's pretty basic. Okay. It might have cost a couple $100. And I'm not saying that you get what you pay for all the time, but sometimes you do.
In
Okay.
in wills, you probably do.
Your will should
Um,
probably be more than a page. All right.
if you've
If
got
you've got
this
$30
much,
million in assets and you have a very specific way you want to distribute it, given that one of your sons is essentially Mark Rober for all intents and purposes,
I love him.
and one of your sons is essentially Chris Farley before, like,
I love him too, though.
but with some worse habits,
True.
if
Well,
that's at all
it's
possible.
also important too to note that like in working with clients, they have very different ideas as far as
Mhm.
how they want to factor in grandchildren to that as well. Like,
Correct.
do they want the money to be split straight down the middle and just given to their kids and their kids do what they want? Or do you want to start to parse it out differently based upon the next generation that's there? So would you be more inclined to give more to the child who has the three grandkids or even some
Correct.
straight to the
Yeah,
grandkids
those
too?
are all very,
So
valid questions to
yeah.
ask. And so part of what we would do immediately is talk through what working with an estate attorney might look like. What are some things that may be offered by the estate attorney?
Right.
And then eventually, probably, if they're amenable to some of those ideas or at least hearing them out, we would say in this case, there's a lot of money on the table.
Yeah.
Okay, so talking gift tax exemptions, we've talked about this before. Let's call it 13 million at the end of
Mhm.
2025. Then it's going to go back to like it's going to basically be cut in half after adjusting for inflation. So it's going to go back basically to seven.
Yeah.
So let's say 14 million is going to go down to seven. All right. So she could exempt 14 mil if she were to die soon. All right. But if not, then it's going to go down to
Mhm.
seven. And then
And
she's paying 40% on the
correct.
23 over that.
Like we said, she's been hospitalized a few times for various things, but there's nothing
No, you
overwhelmingly
can't bank on
concerning,
anything
nor should you.
happening. Right.
But there's no reason to believe that we're talking about a short-term, time with Betty. So, um, we want to expect that,
Correct.
and we typically tend to estimate, a life expectancy of 90, unless
Right.
there's another reason not to.
And so you might say, okay, that's great. Like those are some great generalities. What exactly are you talking to Betty about here before you go to the estate
Yes.
attorney? We're going to say things like, hey, look, I don't know how concerned you are about Chris's behaviors and appetite for your
Mhm.
dollars because, he has habits that he needs to fuel to be on his seventh year of undergrad, and just
Living the
hanging
rugby life.
around, yeah, hanging around, only eligible for B-side games at this point. But like, what he's living a dream. It's not my dream, but it's a dream, I guess.
Um,
So anyway, this guy's doing just delinquent levels of things at all times. How concerned are you there?
no.
Might you consider a trust just for that purpose?
So then,
Forget estate planning,
okay.
forget shielding money from taxes. She might want to trust just so that Chris doesn't get half immediately.
So then it does start to become something that can prompt thoughts or discussions that Betty has not really thought about.
Right.
Betty clearly loves both of her kids and wants to make sure that they both get money and they're well cared for and that they both feel that equitable love. But Betty has expressed concerns to us about the differences between Chris and Mark and the fact that Mark is considering going back to school to get another advanced degree, and Mark is very responsible with his money, and he's, got a very well put together life. And Chris, while the life of the party,
Right.
um, she's worried and she wants to make sure that he doesn't blow it all on a massive party the second that he does it.
Sure.
So how do a lot of conversations would be around how can you make sure that Chris, that
Yeah. All right.
Chris is protected and is receiving funds, but maybe at a evenly distributed even
Correct.
distribution rate or
Correct.
something that ensures that in her
There are all
absence.
kinds of ways you can set things
Right.
up with trustees and various trustees to act in Chris's best interest.
And
And
we
and
would work with the estate attorney at that point. We would
you can have like discretionary distributions so that the
correct.
trustee can decide how much money, whether or not it's a reasonable expense for Chris to go and buy another Ferrari or whatever.
Correct. Or if there's like a real expense that would be out of the norm of spending, they could
They can ask
discretionary
exactly.
say
That's
yes.
exactly correct.
It's
And
important.
and the reason it starts with cash flow is
Yeah,
we need to determine how much Betty actually needs for Betty. How much of
correct.
this 50K is just already being funneled to Chris to go and, be spent?
Correct. And oftentimes you will see this a lot too. Like when you've got
Because we might be able to tuck it away.
correct.
She might be willing to put, the estate
Mhm,
tax current lifetime exclusion away right
mhm,
now, as long as she doesn't have to fund Chris, as
correct.
long as that can do it.
Correct. And maybe she wants to quantify exactly how much she's been helping to support Chris as opposed to Mark. And
Hmm.
maybe there's been some bad feelings between Mark and Chris about this because Mark knows just how much
Right.
Chris has been being supported. So there's so many factors that come into play. There are conversations that would be had. They're not always comfortable. We will always try our best to ensure that we cover all of the basics and make sure that we can help guide Betty to
Right.
identifying what she wants and the best way to get there. And then we like to meet with professionals that are in clients' lives
Hmm.
with them to make sure that all of the professionals in your life are on the same page.
Correct.
So ideally, whether it's an in-person meeting, a meeting on the phone, whatever it is, we would
We
be
would like to be
meeting
there
with,
for
yeah,
sure. We want to
exactly.
participate. And
Correct.
while it's also one of the things that we like to do is educate the next generation. So we would
Yes.
want to, as much as humanly possible, as much as Betty is willing to do it, and Chris and Mark are willing to come
Mhm.
into the office, we'd like to meet with all of them
Yeah.
and talk them through what good decisions with money look like,
Yeah.
and what planning they should be thinking about.
Correct. And I think that that's a
So,
huge
like,
thing.
we're talking so if you look at, like, retirement planning, for example, you
Yep.
might think, "Well, Betty's 70 and, has more
She's
than she
set.
needs."
Yeah.
She doesn't let's say her spending need is maybe 20K a month. Let's say that that's what she wants to spend. She's got
Yeah.
50, right? So we can talk about things like annual gifting to
Mhm.
everyone. We could talk about things like lump funding, 529, you can give
Yep.
5 years up front, so 18 times 5 you can give in tax year, 2024
Mhm.
with no consequence. You just can't give for the next, 4 years, I guess. So you
You're
get
living in the weeds right
I'm
now.
sorry, I'm sorry, the weeds.
She loves it.
I do.
But
It's enjoyable. But the idea is just we can talk
yes.
through all of the options and we can look to again, we said Betty's retirement, not so much of an issue, but we can talk through Mark and Chris's just to make
Yeah.
sure they have enough money. Hey,
Mhm.
maybe even Chris gets on the books on one of these two companies. He then gets earned income.
Yeah.
Now he can fund a Roth.
Correct.
That's
Correct.
good for him down the line.
Maybe Chris becomes motivated by, being able to learn a great skill set and it's exciting. I mean, it's a really exciting prospect. Alternatively, Betty might find herself in a position where she does not want Chris to have any idea how much she is worth.
Sure.
So we would involve the next generation as much or as little as the client would be comfortable doing. But regardless, we would like to at least ensure that the money that Betty is passing on to her kids is well cared for from then on as
I
well.
think one of the primary concerns for a I don't want to say elderly, but adults that are, in their
In the later
retirement
stage,
age. Yeah,
yeah,
sure. They want I mean, I know I would want this personally, but we see this. They want to know that their kids are gonna be provided
yeah,
for and taken care of. They want to know that
they want that, yeah.
they're gonna handle their legacy well, right? Like, that it's not gonna be squandered in years, and
Mhm.
it's not gonna create more problems than it solves. Does
Correct,
that make sense? Like, if you hand
correct.
somebody that has no idea what they're doing, like,
Upfront,
5 plus
yes.
$1,000,000, bad things
Right.
could occur.
Well, and exactly, it reminds me of all of the, like, things where they're like, "Oh, so and so won the lottery," and then, like, the next month, like,
Right.
something terrible happened.
Yeah, they
Um,
OD'd or something.
exactly, and a sudden shift in lifestyle comes with a lot of challenges and
Yeah.
difficulties. And so oftentimes we'll also see that, clients, particularly the high net worth population, struggles with where the balance is between like, I want to give them some now while I'm living so I can enjoy it with them or watch them enjoy it while preserving some for them to have after I'm gone. And so trying to figure out how to meet both of those desires is also something that, we would work with and talk about. And, we would love to help advise
Mhm.
the second generation on, just the best ways to ensure the funds are continuing to grow.
Right, and so another thing we talked about, we remember we started with cash flow,
Mhm.
and now
That was we
and that kind of
just
led a little bit into,
yeah,
like, how we're gonna talk about estate planning,
yeah,
how we're gonna think a little bit even about retirement, how much can we actually give to them now? How much
correct.
can
So
we give
that's
to the
three
kids? How much can we
different
give to the 529s?
exactly
The
areas,
cash flow is the hub. This is, like, the first fundamental building block that we need to make your plan,
regardless of what
regardless
your
of your
net
level
worth is.
of
Yeah,
dollars
exactly.
that you have, right? So, we're now gonna talk about investment planning. If you don't
Yes.
actually have a need for more than 20,000 and your investments are spinning out 60 $600,000 a year and giving
Mhm,
you 50,000 a month, do they need to be allocated that way?
mhm.
Like, and again, it's Betty's call, and her preferences for, like, security here. So if she really wants fixed income and she really doesn't wanna pay the government, then sure, we can stick it in muni bonds and call it a day.
Sure.
But she might be thinking like, "Hey, I'm thinking about Mark. I'm thinking about Mark's grandkids. I know
Yeah.
Chris is gonna have kids. He probably already does.
Yeah. Who may
Um,
come
they're gonna yeah, they may
after.
come back
They
into his
may come
life
later.
when he, discovers
Yes.
responsibility,
Or
hopefully in his later adult years.
potentially once Betty is no longer with us, which
Right.
so the will comes in place
Sure,
there
but, like,
too.
so she may wanna take some of these dollars, some of
Yeah,
these millions of dollars and advocate, at least if they're in the companies or whatever, she can at least advocate for it, and she said she had 2,000,000 in a brokerage, she can take
yeah,
those dollars and put them in, tax advantaged investments, which might
correct.
looks like something, like the US domestic market, VTI or something like that is
Mhm,
completely sensible for a chunk of these dollars. You wouldn't
correct.
dump it all there, but,
And in this scenario, Betty really at the end of the day just wants to make sure that her cash flow remains something that is sustainable to live on and that the like entirety of the estate remains healthy and is something that she can pass on to her kids. So,
mhm,
in talking to her about investments, she wants to know her money is well cared for.
right,
We want to help educate her, but she really is just kind of doesn't really know the differences between all of the different investment types. So, being able to explain it to her in a way where she understands, like, option A is this and the benefits are this, option B is this and the benefits are this. Um,
right.
is gonna be a really important thing, and that's
Yeah, I mean, her
exactly what we would
understanding
do.
is paramount.
Correct.
The next segment we would actually jump into with her is insurance planning,
Yeah.
and you might be thinking, again, so much money, like, why would you need life insurance?
Yeah, you
Well,
could
a
self-insure
lot of
everything.
yeah, exactly. So a lot of the thought again, it does you're right, you could self-insure everything, and it depends on Betty's risk tolerance, and
Yep.
that's a conversation that we would absolutely have. One of the things we find is, life insurance salesmen are no strangers to people with dollars. What they
They'll
want those
find
dollars.
Betty a
Right.
mile
So it's
away.
very likely she might already be in a policy.
Yep.
So our idea is, we would want to evaluate that policy, find out if it's actually where she should be, needs to be, or wants to be, when it's going to lapse. Because a lot of these policies, you might jump into a universal life policy, a
Yep.
VUL or something, variable universal life policy. And as you age, your cash value will start to have to go towards the insurance premiums
Mhm.
and it will erode. And eventually the policy will just lapse because
Yeah,
there's no longer sufficient cash value.
to pay for it.
Even if you're paying your level premiums that you had agreed on forever, it will still just lapse at some point unless you dump more premiums in. Anyway, you can roll the policies. You
Well,
can make the, you can
I think
change. You
this
could
speaks to, like, something we do with our clients annually is review the insurance policies that they have to make sure that it still meets their needs and that it's still where they need to be. This is no exception for high net worth individuals.
correct.
So we would certainly be looking at that, but, you're also talking about, her auto insurance, her home insurance. Um, when you're talking that kind of high net worth, if I get in a car accident with Betty,
Oh, we're
I'm
talking
super
max
calm.
liability on auto and home,
Yeah,
as well as an umbrella policy.
that's
And then you might even want commercial liability. It depends on your businesses and what the nature of those
correct.
are. But you want to be covered. You do
Yes.
not want people that are suing you to be accessing this
Yes.
$30 million of your net worth.
Yes.
Right? So you absolutely are gonna want umbrella policies.
Without a
You're gonna
doubt.
want probably additional umbrella policies.
Yep.
Um,
And again, with this, if you're working with an insurance broker or anything like that, to buy said insurance policies, that is another thing that we would very much want to participate with clients in. Just because, we've talked about it on our podcast before. Insurance salesmen, for better or worse, make their living on sales of insurance. So
correct.
they're
It's
certainly,
commission.
yes.
It's commission driven.
So
They're gonna
they're
sell you as big of a
incentivized to
policy
sell
as
you
they
as
can.
much as possible, and we want to make sure that you get exactly what you need.
Right.
Um, so
So I think a lot of that, to recap, a lot of this boils down to that, having a
yeah,
conversation with Betty about what she actually wants.
yes.
So, and I mean, you
She
would
may not even, and most of the time we'll find that clients don't even know what the options are. They
right.
don't even know how to
Absolutely
know what
right.
to want because they don't know. It's like going to a buffet asking what meal you want and you haven't even seen the food.
Right. And
Um,
especially if we said that she's not, the managing partner of the LLC
yeah,
partnership and she's not really running the C corp to our knowledge, she might not be all that well versed in business
yeah,
ventures and enterprises and might really be kind of out of her depth when she's even meeting with the other professionals.
yeah,
So when she's meeting with a CPA and a state attorney, sometimes these are the most valuable clients. Like these clients tend to want us or CFP professional by their side more than
I would say
others
yes.
even,
Yeah,
right? Because
yep,
first they're going to have the largest need to meet with an estate attorney, particularly
correct.
like high powered ones that are at the top of very tall buildings in downtown
Yep.
areas.
Like we said, Betty in this situation is somebody who um, is high net worth as a result of a legacy from parents,
Familial legacy,
grandparents,
sure.
etc. So it's always been taken care of. So there's nothing that she's ever had to learn. It's not that she's not willing to, but
Right.
she hasn't had the opportunity or exposure to it.
Right.
So, I mean, I will tell you, I personally have no interest in going and trying to buy a car by myself. I would never do that. I know myself. I know in a heartbeat
I mean, I don't love it either, to be honest with you.
it doesn't matter. You are a male. And so when they see you, there's at
Wow,
least,
there it is.
I mean, let's be honest. They see me and they're like, yes. So,
Probably, yeah.
but I, but I know for a fact that while I may be, or at least try to be well versed on certain things, buying a car is not that. So I would want to bring somebody who's far better at that. And so
The
it's
topics discussed are also just going to
yes,
be
they're
ridiculous.
so
You're going to have people
specific.
just flinging like, okay, so we're going to think about making an
Term.
IDGT, you know, and we're going
If
to
we
have like,
think you're in the weeds, then
oh yeah,
they're really
yeah, and what are we going to do about this eyelet? Can I get the, you know, yeah, they're just,
it's hard too because I think that when you're in a room with a bunch of professionals, oftentimes there's this race to sound like the most important person in the room, particularly when you have a potential client or a high net worth individual. I'm sure they're no stranger to this. The appeasing or the like peacocking, right?
Mhm.
And so being sure that you're comfortable with somebody who's going to advocate for your best needs, no matter who else is in the room
Right.
or what we're looking at is of the utmost importance.
Right. And you get to have conversations after the meeting, right? So you guys get to go back and
Correct.
converse, and you can just say they can ask you then,
Yeah.
hey, so
What is
what did that mean? What is an
yeah,
IDGT? Like, why am I even thinking about
right,
that? What's a graph? What's a
right.
graph? Like,
Yeah.
why? What are we talking about here?
Exactly. I mean, the goal is like it's a very hard thing for anybody, I think, to in a room with multiple people be like, what does this none of this makes sense to me. That's an uncomfortable position for anybody to be in. But hopefully, and I like to pride ourselves in thinking that we've built a relationship with our clients
Correct.
where they would be very comfortable one-on-one or in a group setting with us to be like, all of that was so over my head. Like, can you please
Yeah.
explain
Explain
it
it
to
like
me
I'm
like
five.
five? Years I
Exactly.
read it. And so that is part of the role that we have. It's not in the services, handout or pamphlet that we have for clients. But that's the goal for all of it is to
Yeah.
make it very accessible for use.
Everything needs to be salient, or we're not doing our jobs.
Correct.
All righty,
Correct. Well
guys.
said.
Thanks for listening.
Yep.
If you have any suggestions as to what you'd like to hear, what kind of scenarios you'd like us to, first, if you like this format, let us
Yeah.
know. If you have any suggestions as to what kind of scenarios you'd want to hear about, or if you want to give us yours anonymously,
Mhm.
we'll happily call you Bob, Linda, or any other cartoon family you want. We haven't done Homer and Marge yet, so they're on deck. But anyway, email us podcast
Yep.
at equilibriumfp.com. You can find us at equilibriumfp.com.
Yep.
And thanks for listening.
Yeah. Till next time.
All righty.